So glad to have you back with us on Curiosity, Not Judgment. My name is Birga.
And I'm Gary.
So I had the opportunity to be a guest on a different podcast a few weeks ago, and I was listening to prior episodes in preparation and heard a phrase in the week prior to my being on this that really just resonated with me. And I texted Gary, I said, hey, what do you think about this as a topic? And the phrase was simply, you have to love that you want to change. In other words, if there's a person that you're hoping to change their behavior or change their stance, you have to love them first. There's not a lot of hope in getting them to change behavior or outlook if you have no care or love for them. And I don't know why that hit me so strongly in the moment, but it just did, and got me thinking about how we all have our agendas and we want people to join our agendas, match our agendas. And if we're doing it out of force, you're almost never going to get a convert. But if you do it out of love, you may find a very different outcome. And so just wanted to discuss that today.
Yeah, obviously people, when we're trying to figure out or make a decision or trying to decide something on our own or figure out a course of action, we often go to people that we trust. Mm-hmm. And so when you say about love and trust, that's the kind of people that we are going to listen to. Mm-hmm. If we don't trust a person, why would we listen to them at all? And it reminds me of the government during World War II was trying to get people to eat visceral meat, and they had all these different kind of campaigns. And the one that worked was the one that didn't tell them they had to do it. Mm. It was the one that just talked about all the reasons why this was going to benefit the war effort and the nation as a whole. And so when people understood the why, it was much easier. But you can understand that the government is not a person that you can get to know and trust.
Right.
So there's always going to be a little bit of a barrier there. And if you don't trust the government at all, why would you do something that the government's trying to tell you to do? Especially if you think they're not for you.
Sure. Or
for your health and well-being and or your good. And so I think there's a lot of truth to that. If you want something to change, then you have to love that thing, that person, that situation. Mm. Now, a little easier to say than to do sometimes.
Sure. I guess I hadn't really thought about applying it to institutions or applying it to a larger number of people. I guess I was really thinking about it in the one-on-one context.
Sure.
And certainly we can imagine how that would play out. If you've got a colleague that you have no love for, maybe there's a very contentious relationship and you're trying to get them to side with you or get them over to your cause, good luck, right? I mean, there's that lack of trust. There's a kind of inherent understanding like, hey, this person does not have my best interest at heart. Why would I comply with them, with their wishes? And maybe even the converse, I'm going to do everything I can to avoid that position because I know they're not trustworthy or they don't care for me or whatever. When you say something about you need to love the situation in order to change it, that is very curious to me. And I have to think about that maybe even in the context of nonprofit or NGO campaigns. So if you've got somebody who's running a campaign that's been hired to do it from an outside entity, if they don't have a love for the cause, is it going to be successful? Do they have enough track record of, fundraising or successful campaigns with other organizations where they have a natural skill set and it could potentially work out? Or does that same thing hold true when you're trying to, raise funds for a charity or trying to change policy, for example, for a marginalized people group?
Well, I think absolutely. I mean, the first rule of leadership in a company is, if you're going to have, middle management try to sell to the rank and file a certain position, well, it's best if they believe in that thing that they're trying to sell. If you have a salesman who doesn't believe in their product, how effective are they going to be? If you've got somebody in your situation that's going to run a campaign for an NGO and they're not passionate about it, then what are they relying on? They're relying on a formula-based approach, a process that has no passion or love in it. That seems like it's doomed to fail. Mm.
This is a very curious conversation that we're literally having on the fly. We've not had any preparatory, work done on this. And so,
How unusual.
not really, that's kind of how we operate. But it gives me pause. And I think about, boards that I serve on and things that I'm involved in. I can say, I've got a board meeting tonight. And so this is very front and center in my mind. And while I believe the organization that I serve on the board for is a great organization and doing a great thing, I really struggle with a personal connection to the people group because I've never visited there. I don't have any experience in it. I don't think it's a lack of love, but it is a lack of understanding and a lack of empathy. And so I question, am I effective as a board member because of that disconnect? What has been your policy if you're serving on a board or if you've been asked to be involved in a nonprofit type campaign or organization where you don't really have a connection to the people who are being served?
Well, I think it's harder for sure. And I mean, the first thing I try to do is go and do that thing. I mean, let's talk about, New Mexico ramps, a great example of a mutual friend of ours who's now very involved with that. If you haven't gone out and built a ramp, I think it's much harder to figure out, what they do and what they're about and why they do things the way they do. I mean, if you're just in there to try to figure out the funding sources and how to make all that work, I suppose you could do it. But man, I think going out and building a ramp really gets you involved with the people, the processes, the way things are done, and kind of gives you a feel for what's going on.
Yeah.
Can you do it without that? Absolutely. I think it's harder to make that connection that you talked about. And without that connection, you don't have that understanding. And let me just ask a curious question. Can you truly love something that you don't understand, that you don't have an understanding or a connection to?
I don't know. I suppose as a superficial emotional response, perhaps, but that deep love that I think we're alluding to that would lead to change, I don't know that you could love somebody at that level without having an understanding or an engagement or interaction with them. And so this is something to maybe that we get to experiment with in the weeks and the months ahead. I'm thinking about the international student organization that you have hosted. You've hosted international students, I should say, for decades now, right? Through an international student organization affiliated with our local university. And so because of your enthusiasm and because of the reports that you have given about how impactful it was for you, your family, for the students, you got me fired up.
Right.
And so I had, I'm going to say, a pass on love maybe for that organization just because of your enthusiasm and because I know you, but it was difficult to understand what that was going to feel like and what that experience was truly going to be until we committed to do it.
Until you do it, yeah.
Yeah, so we're hosting our second student presently, and I do love the experience. It is a lot of fun to meet kids from other cultures and to have them learn about your culture. And, did I have love for this organization before I became involved? No, but I think there's something to be said for having someone you trust exude a love and an excitement that can rub off on you.
There's no question. And again, it's still, it's like a caterpillar looking up and seeing a butterfly flying around and goes, wow, I'd love to do that. But, you can't experience it until you actually go through the metamorphosis and fly. It's a butterfly can't explain to a caterpillar what that's like. And so I think that direct experience is absolutely crucial when you can get it. Now, we're in situations where we're going to have to make decisions and choose courses of actions on things that we do not understand and that we do not know. And we're going to just have to get the data we can and do it. But we've discussed before how there's a gradation of things. Call it 1 to 5, where 1 is buying something on a transaction with somebody who's selling it to you, and you're never going to know this person again, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to put about this much effort into it. Whereas if it's something that you're going to have to deal with every day for the rest of your life, or a relationship like a marriage. Or a partnership in business, well, that's something you should pay a little bit more attention to. And
a lot more attention.
A lot more attention to. So I think that there's gradations of that, and you don't want to spend too little on spend the 1 effort on a 5 or vice versa.
Yeah.
But But you do need to spend some effort, and I think that people, there's a reason why referrals and why advertisers use referrals, is because if I can identify with a person and that person likes it, and I believe they like it, and they're not just being paid to say so, well, then I'm going to want to give that a try versus something else. I mean, I have a joke about, I going to the movies wasn't necessarily my favorite thing to do, and especially when I'm so far behind, I can just throw something up on the big screen, and the theater experience at your house makes a big difference. So my joke is, will I wait until 6 people that I know know what I like recommend it to me?
Then you'll watch it.
Then I'll go,
Okay.
to the movie or something. But the point is, how do we determine actions? And back to your original point, how do we, if we're going to try to initiate change in a situation, how do we come to an understanding of how that thing works enough to make the change occur? Which I think comes back to, why do you want it to change? So there must be something that's going on that is, in your own perception, adversely affecting you. Otherwise, you wouldn't care if it changes or not.
Boy, this is fuel for the conversation tonight at the board meeting, I tell you right now. And I'm just thinking even about how I got involved with this organization. And so they serve aged out orphans in Haiti. I have never been to Haiti. I have never been an orphan. I do not know that experience. I do not know that process. However, I became acquainted, then became friends with a deep love for the director of the organization. And when he asked me to join the board, I did it out of love for him, not necessarily out of the young men that are being served through the organization. And so it is very interesting, and I think maybe is even appropriate for discussion for us as a board members. If we're all there simply for the love of the director, is that sufficient?
Or appropriate, and the other, well, and there's about 7 roads you could go from there even, but that is also, it puts a dependence on the director, and one could argue an undue dependence on the director of being able to represent what the actual need is and the best way to fill it. And that's one opinion.
Right.
Now, doesn't mean it's the wrong opinion. Could be the exact right opinion. But it occurs to me that if you had 5 board members go down there who had never been there before, by definition, they're going to come away with 5 different impressions.
Yes.
Of what the real problem, of what the problem is, what the real problem is, what the right questions to ask, and what the right answers or solutions might be. And so would that make it a more healthy board? Sounds like it, but who knows? And again, we can't be everywhere at once.
No.
We have to rely on other people.
And there are circumstances in which you just cannot, for whatever reason, make that connection. And in this case, our government is encouraging people to avoid travel to Haiti. There are kidnappings all the time,
right.
And as a Caucasian woman, I would be a prime target for kidnapping in this scenario. And so, would it make sense for me to go to Haiti and be boots on the ground and experience all of those things that these young men are walking through as aged out orphans? I don't know that that's advisable right now.
No. So then you have to think, okay, so what change am I trying to make, and do I love this? And the answer is vicariously through the director. I think it's a good cause. It makes sense to me. And then it's, am I adding value? If I'm adding value, and according to the person who's passionate about it and who has been there and who has experienced those exact things, well then, maybe it's a worthwhile thing. One of the things that occurs to me also, though, in saying that is that the best use of your time?
Right.
Is that the highest and best use of Birga's time, given that there are things that you can be directly involved in?
Certainly.
And so that's a whole other thing. But you started this out with one-on-one, and I think that one-on-one is a good place to start, because I find myself constantly convincing other people, or trying to I hope develop a co-vision with other people, uh, and figuring out how to get things done. And when I go into a situation, well, luckily for me, I suppose, I like to collaborate and get a lot of different people's opinions and then kind of formulate my own. And I appreciate differing opinions. And I think it's suspect when I talk to 5 people and they all have the same exact solution set for a given problem.
Sure.
And they've defined the problem in the same way. So, and I appreciate that. And I'm very much, because of my background and all the places I've lived and all the things I've done, I'm okay with, stating a position, and then someone says, nope, that's not quite right, and then changing that position. Now, a lot of people mistake me stating a position with passion as the position that I will never sway from, and that's not the case. But the point is, how do we talk to people about, well, what about this, and what about this? And I think actually the curiosity, not judgment part goes a long way in that. Asking questions versus giving people directives, especially if the trust isn't there yet or isn't there at all.
Right.
And I'm reminded of that quote I told you about before, which is, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And I think that's so true. And so in one-on-one situations, I think if you can prove that you care about the person and or you care about the situation, I think you can be in a situation where maybe that trust isn't quite there yet, but you establish that you care the same way, or not the exact same way, but you also care about the situation.
Yeah.
Then somebody says, okay, well, they're an ally for me then, because they care about the situation. I'm going to listen to them, or at least give them a shot.
Yeah. I'm reminded, and I think I shared this maybe a couple dozen episodes ago, but somebody dear to me was really considering putting a yard sign up that had a very charged statement. And I just questioned, I said, what is that going to accomplish? The people that disagree with that sign, are they going to look at the sign and say, oh, I had it wrong all along. I'm convinced, I'm converted. Here we go. My mind has changed. Or have you now put a sign in your yard that is going to solidify a view of, oh, that person is a blank and they won't want anything to do with you? Does your desire to change somebody's viewpoint because you feel passionate about it, because you feel you've been dishonored, or there's injustice, or whatever it is that you feel, that you're so passionate that you'll pick it, you put a sign in your yard, you'll be part of a crowd of people that's going to try to change policy? Does anyone get converted, I'm saying that, kind of as a generic term, to your way of thinking through just simply that force of demonstration? And, going back to this question about that nobody's going to listen to you if there's not some degree of trust or care,
Or connection.
Yeah, I think that very much applies to that type of kind of group think and mob mentality.
Yeah. So, as you say that, though, I am saying yes, and by the way, those are the exact same reasons I don't put a sign out, is because we're so polarized as a country today. Any sign you put out, 50% of people are going to hate you and 50% of the people are going to like you. And to me, I don't like to go into a room and pejoratively state a divisive opinion right up front and lose half the room if I'm trying to convince them or trying to get them to see a vision or a way forward for something. I do a lot of speaking on the energy transition right now, and if I started out with a slide that was something like this yard sign, well, I'd lose half the people in the room immediately, and that's just not worth it to me. On the other hand, if you did hold a position and you came back to your block one day and everybody had a yard sign and it was opposite your position, you might say, maybe I should rethink this. Or let's say you were timidly holding this position because you're so worried about speaking out, even though you feel strongly about it, and you see a yard sign, you might think, okay, I'm not alone on this.
Yeah, perhaps.
So those things, I mean, it can be good. The problem is that the negative consequences and risks probably outweigh
The benefits.
any of those benefits that I just talked about, and may get your yard trashed.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Well, so how do we begin to cultivate a love for somebody that we are opposite to, that holds a very contrary position, somebody who we would ultimately want to change, so to speak? How do we begin to cultivate love?
I think that, well, you just said it. Cultivate love is show love, and love is a verb, not a noun. Love takes action. Love, you can love on someone that hates you. You can love on people that have wildly different views than you. It doesn't matter. It should not matter, one could argue. If you want to make the world a better place, then love on the people, the very people. It's easy to love the people that love you.
Sure.
It's much harder to love the people that don't love you. If you can love those people, then you're doing the thing that one could argue is the true integrity way to live. If you believe that love is the answer and love is the way to make the world a better place and the way to help people come around to a better belief system, if you think your belief system is better, well then the thing you should start with is showing that love. Building that bridge of trust, building those connections. And by the way, you may learn something along the way.
Oh, sure.
And understand things in a different light than you did before, which I think is part of the journey.
Yeah. Well, and it makes me think back again when we were talking about how do we find common ground with somebody that we really disagree with. And I think we started off with some exploratory questions of some very basic, human likes and dislikes, and can we find anything to agree upon? Because if you can begin with some of those kind of seeds of agreement, then maybe relationship, trust, and love can grow. Like, hey, are you a breakfast eater?
Yeah.
What do you like for breakfast? Oh, me too. I love that cereal. It's silly. It's a silly example, but it's something. We as people, humans love to feel that sense of connection.
That's
and we
right.
love to find points of agreement because it validates ourselves.
That's right.
And so, we're inherently selfish. But I think that it goes a long way in trying to find some of those initial seeds of commonality that can grow to trust and then ultimately to love. So some good things to think about. Man, I'm going to have to really contemplate how the board meeting goes this evening, but I hope for all of us, it really does give us some pause to think about, if we're adamantly trying to change someone's position, are we showing them love?
It should never be a problem to go into any setting and state that you are asking questions for the purpose of the fact that you're for that group being successful and you're trying to get to the truth. You should never be punished for asking questions that get to the truth.
Well, hence our whole 80-something odd episodes here of Curiosity, Not Judgment, right?
That's right.
Well, thank you for listening. We always value your input and your feedback. You can find all of the different platforms we're on at curiositynotjudgment.com. We also have a comment section there on the webpage and encourage you to send us a little note. And you're also welcome to do so, of course, right on YouTube or some of the other comment options. So we'll see you next week and love those around you well.
Take care.